Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Includability Shorts, a series of short, snappy chats stuffed with hot tips from our incredible partner experts. I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderful Sophie Kang from our brilliant award-winning includability partner, Sign Solutions. Sophie, just so lovely to see you as always. And I know how incredible Sign Solutions are at breaking down barriers for the deaf community. For the many organisations that want to create and really develop that inclusive culture, but perhaps feel lost as to where they should start, what would be your guidance as to how they can enable communication between deaf and hearing people in the workplace?
Well, thank you very much, Dave, for the introduction and for having me. In general, you don't know what you don't know. So you have to rely on specialist organisations to be able to provide you with the support. And the whole world of ED&I is such a big space, and relying upon those who specialise in certain skills or communication styles or support is really important, and the best kind of thing to do to start off when you're looking and wanting to make your recruitment process is more accessible, because really it does start from recruitment. It's about how and where you find deaf people and how you then support them through the interview process, all the way through to then how you then support that person when they're in employment, and how do you create cultural change within your workplace to make that person feel comfortable at work, they can communicate with their hearing colleagues, and how to best support them. So Sign Solutions, we provide all forms of non-spoken communication support, and we kind of became aware of the barriers that, deaf people have always faced barriers in accessing any kind of service and also in employment. But during COVID, it kind of highlighted another additional barrier for how deaf people can communicate with employers, whether or not they be within work or looking to get into employment, particularly with kind of the remote side of things and everything switching to, as opposed to face-to-face, going remotely. So as an organisation, we looked at kind of the processes that were in place, and it really started with supporting organisations in how they advertise their jobs. So a lot of I don't think there's any organisation out there who doesn't want to employ a deaf or disabled person. It's just, how do you get those people to come and work for you? Where do you advertise your jobs? So recruitment process is really important, and it's really key for those who are looking at advertising jobs to make sure that your job advertisements are accessible. So somebody who is a BSL user, for example, their first language is British Sign Language. So therefore, is the job description translated into a BSL video? That would kind of be the first thing that I'd be saying to organisations to think about doing, just simply so that person can fully understand what is expected of them within that role, so that then they can apply if that's the relevant role for them, so they can apply in from watching the video. Another thing to consider is kind of allowing that person to submit a BSL translation or BSL video of their job application, so they can do it within their first language, because written English tends to be quite difficult for a BSL user to understand and write. So giving them the option to be able to apply in BSL is fantastic. We do that with all of our jobs that we advertise. And then once that person is successful into getting an interview, how does an employer support them with communication support at the interview stage? So Access to Work have a funding for, can't remember what the phrase is now, but it's interview support, communication support at work. So if a sign language user requires a BSL interpreter to support them on the interview, Access to Work will fund that. And it means that person can get the access that they need at their interview, and it's pre-booked, and the interpreter will join the call, or they'll do a face-to-face interview, kind of whatever the organisation's preference is. And that means that deaf person then can communicate through the sign language interpreter on their interview. The kind of the next step really, in terms of if that person is successful in the interview and then they get a job within an organisation, is how they are then supported within the workplace. So again, Access to Work is funding that's provided by the government to enable communication support at work. So it pays for reasonable adjustments, basically. So BSL interpreters, note takers, if you've got if you need an interpreter to do translations for you of work processes, content, that is what Access to Work communication support funding is there for. That's kind of like in brief what you can think about doing for a deaf person. And then I'd be getting organisations to think about what they are doing themselves and their hearing colleagues are doing, because deaf awareness is really important, because it's great having somebody who is deaf can work for you, but if you can't communicate with them, they can't communicate with you. That person is left being isolated and might not want to, continue working within that organisation if they feel like they can't communicate with their colleagues. So deaf awareness is really important. Kind of general etiquette. So if you're using an interpreter, to think about how you're speaking to a deaf person. So don't ever speak to the interpreter, speak to the deaf person. The interpreter is there just to facilitate communication between the hearing and the deaf person. Communication tools like video interpreting is great if for kind of one-off meetings, when you need access to an interpreter there and then, when you haven't got a face-to-face interpreter. And just general kind of, the remote side of stuff, like you think about Teams calls that you might have, or Zoom calls. As hearing people, sometimes we can kind of speak over each other, whereas for an interpreter, it's quite difficult to interpret when there's a lot of people speaking at the same time. So when you're in, it's kind of video etiquette really, when you're in a meeting, raising your virtual hand to show that you are speaking, so the interpreter can have clear understanding of who is speaking and then sign clearly for that deaf person. So just kind of like general etiquette like that, how you position yourself in a meeting, where you sit, those kinds of things. So I mean, as an organisation, we provide all of this support, and we've been partnered with Includability for some years now. So we're here to provide the support and the advice for organisations wanting to be accessible. And really, as I kind of mentioned previously, it's such a big area, EDI. We are specialists in terms of the deaf community and supporting organisations in being accessible in every aspect of supporting deaf people. So that's kind of in brief.
Sophie, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for all of your your guidance and your knowledge and your expertise. And of course, we're so madly in love with Sign Solutions and the incredible service offering that they provide. Thank you, Sophie, again. It's an absolute joy to catch up as always. And to everyone who has just watched our latest Includability short, thank you, of course, so much for joining us. And for more of these light bulb moments, please do head over to weareincludability.co.uk. You can check out our YouTube and our Spotify channels through there as well. Please, let's keep learning, let's keep growing, and let's make our workplaces more inclusive, diverse, and mentally healthy together. Have a fantastic day, everyone.